Hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone present here from wherever you're joining in. Hope you're enjoying Sankalp as much as we are organizing it. Thank you for joining into this session on innovative investing models for transition states. Please feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat box and also post any questions that you might have, and we shall take it up at the end. Today's session is actually part of the project undertaken by IDRC and Intellecap together on promoting a resilient and inclusive private sector in transition states with a focus on 3 countries, Sierra Leone, Somalia, and Mozambique. Before we get into the panel discussion, please allow me to share some key insights from our research very briefly. Our project was based on the insight that despite the private sector's growth and ripeness, investment in transition states are currently low due to both perceived and real risks. The project intends to showcase business and investment opportunities in these countries by providing a landscape of both private and impact enterprises and impact investment, including ecosystem support organizations. For this project specifically, the team relied on both desk research and findings from primary interviews with around 100 plus impact enterprises from these countries, around 40 plus investors and ecosystem support organizations from these 3 countries, some of which are also present with us on this panel. The 3 countries under consideration have been showing consistent growth of the past few years, keeping 2020 as an exception, of course. Sierra Leone has displayed average annual growth of 5%, during the last 3-year period from 2017 to 19, driven by sectoral growth. And Somalia had witnessed a growth of around 3% during the same period. However, Mozambique, to this exception, has been witnessing a declining trend in its GDP growth rate after the debt scandal in 2016. As is also visible in the slide that I'm sharing, the SDG progress for all the countries have been slow. While Sierra Leone ranked 153 out of 193 countries, Somalia ranked 163 and Mozambique ranked 140. There also, as you can see, there also remains major challenges in most of the SDG targets for all the 3 countries. Private sector in the transition countries plays a critical role in economic development by creating jobs and incomes, building innovative approaches to development challenges, and also providing scalable solutions to even the last mile. Although our research found that although the private impact enterprise landscape in these countries is nascent and is still dominated by subsistence businesses, it is rapidly growing. Increasingly, enterprises are offering services that can further social, economic, and environmental impact. The research found that there were more impact enterprises providing access to goods and services such as energy, nutritious food, affordable credit, quality healthcare, and sanitation services to women. On the other hand, there were few enterprises that also offered services. We saw that although the countries were receiving impact investments between 2005 to 2019, most of the capital was deployed by DFIs and donors. The private fund managers landscape we saw was very nascent. We saw that while debt and equity and guarantees are common instruments that were used by DFIs, most donors, as expected, relied on grants and debt. Most fund managers relied on equity, and few also adopted blended finance strategies. In terms of sectors, we saw that agriculture, energy, and healthcare and financial services received most of the investments. We saw that the actual investments, based on our research, we found that the actual investments were way lower than the potential of the private sector. This was primarily because there were several challenges faced by both the enterprises and investors. If you can look at the slides, I would like to take you through the enterprises' challenges, very few and briefly, very quickly. The first one was access to affordable finance or affordable credit. Most of the enterprises from these 3 countries, both from the rural and urban regions, have echoed access to finance as a critical challenge. High interest rates ranging between 28 to 30%, along with mandatory collateral requirements by banks, restricts many small players to approach formal financial institutions. While there has been presence of not-for-profit MFIs, such as LAPO, Munafa, or BRAC, their reach seemed to be limited. There were also infrastructural challenges. It was seen that high cost of electricity and transportation severely limited the growth of sectors such as agriculture and manufacturing. Further, absence of skilled labor is also one of the main obstacles in scaling up the businesses, since in most circumstances, resources are limited. Finding right set of technology, technical and business support, such as accounting or legal advice or business consultants, was cited as a key challenge. Many enterprises also highlighted lack of financial know-how or bookkeeping as one of the major setbacks. In terms of regulatory challenges, many enterprises suggested that while relevant law exists, the implementation was a challenge that resulted in low confidence in the system, both by the investor and investee. From the macroeconomic perspective, due to high currency fluctuations, many of the investors invest in either USD or other foreign currencies. Consequentially, enterprises are expected to repay investments in foreign currency, which, if appreciates against the local currency, causes huge losses to the enterprises. Women entrepreneurs specifically faces greater challenges with respect to access to information and access to finance. Information because of lack of mobility outside the home or lower technological literacy, and finance because there are banks that mandates mail signatures in case of loan. Many women also many women who have started businesses to supplement household income are hesitant to take on more financing, we were told. Apart from this, from the investor's perspective, one of the critical challenges that we saw was in lack of investment readiness of the enterprises. The private sector landscape in most of these economies is dominated by informal businesses, we found, that usually lack proper documents and are in most cases unregistered. In addition, the formal enterprises are small and require very small capital, usually less than $50,000 to expand the business. Most of the investors have a minimum ticket size requirement, and they find it difficult to source enterprises that meet their criteria. From the macroeconomic perspective, the instability coupled with high political and security risk is a significant concern. Taking evidence from Ebola crisis about the link between health and economic crisis, investors now are expecting a larger economic impact from recent COVID crisis. Such risk also causes significant delay in and cancellation in projects and result in high cost for the investors, dampening their investment interest in the economy. In terms of bureaucratic challenges, while repatriation is easy and open in Sierra Leone, it was seen to be a challenge in Somalia, where only a few Somali banks and financial institutions were connected to the international banking system. Lastly, there were concerns about corporate governance. Most enterprises have not undergone financial training and are not exposed to necessary corporate governance, and they lack financial and operational records. Having understood all of this, we realized that there is a need for innovative investment strategies given the context of these countries and the challenges from the enterprise and the investor's perspective. Intellecap in their report has suggested few investment strategies for each country based on the research. This session intends to discuss three strategies, particularly. One is the outcome-based financing, a mechanism in which funds are linked to completion of pre-specified outcome and performance measures. The second one is blended finance, where there is combination of capital in form of grant, equity, debt, either backed by guarantees from donors, corporates, or foundation, or backed by technical assistance. We are also going to look at leveraging fintech or technologies for credit assessment of MSMEs in case they lack financial records, and in case of informal businesses, the case that we saw in most of these economies. Okay, thank you so much for listening to my monologue so patiently. If anything that I mentioned triggers a question, please put that in the chat and we can take it up there. From here on, we'll move into the panel discussion. But before that, I would like to show you a small video. I hope this time it works fine. This is a video from an enterprise from Sierra Leone called Go Markets. Before I let Flaubert take over, I'll quickly share that video. Okay, can you guys see the screen? Okay.
Yes, Charu, we can.
Great.
Hi, my name is and CEO of Go Market. Go Market is a mobile app that connects smallholder farmers to the consumers via mobile app. Just like many other African countries, Sierra Leonean agricultural supply chain is still informal. A farmer will lose 30 to 40% of their harvest by just trying to transport and sell their product to the market. In the other hand, the retailers that buy from the farmers cannot buy many products due to the lack of storage or cooling system, especially for fresh and perishable products like fruit and vegetable. Seeing that situation, our team decided to bridge that gap through mobile technology. After some research and trial, we came out with a Go Market app, which is a platform that enables directly smallholder farmers to connect to their consumer and small retailers in Freetown. Yeah, we started our operation in 2019 with just 4 retailers as a pilot. And today we have 5 collection centers with over 250 smallholder farmers and 47 retailers attached to it. Just in 1 year and a half, we have helped these 20 and 50 farmers to cut down the cost of logistics. Go Market business model is business to business, but also business to consumer model. We do purchase from our network of smallholder farmers and then distribute to our network of a retailer by linking directly those farmers to the market. And with the COVID-19, we have to pivot and target the consumer, the end user, so that they can directly order from our mobile app and get it delivered to their doorstep for much. Yes, we have the addressable market, and Sierra Leone has a fast-growing population. We have over 7 million people living in the country. But our main target here is the Freetown urban market. Freetown urban market has over 1,000 to 2,000 small and medium-sized vendors buying a minimum $20 of food stock. Our main target is to be their main suppliers, taking from farmers and supplying them. Ladies and gentlemen, join us and let's link these smallholder farmers to the market. Today, we are looking for funding. We are open for partnership. We are looking for investors. We are looking for angel capitalists, and we are raising over 1,000K. We believe with this funding, we can finalize to set up our central pack out. We can increase the number of product collection centers, but also make more profit by recruiting more retail. But before you go, quick one. Remember, always max up SCC. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, Flaubert, I think please allow me, everybody, another 2 minutes to introduce the panel. It got mixed up with the losing of the slides. I'm sorry the slides are not visible, but on the panel, thank you so much, all the panelists for joining us. We have Mr. Abu Bukar, the founder and CEO of Solar Gen Technologies, a Somali company that focuses on energy, water, and irrigation for communities in rural and conflict-affected areas in Eastern Africa. We also have Mr. Abdikani, program manager from Shakadoon, a not-for-profit that offers solutions and interventions dedicated to skill development, employment services, youth entrepreneurship, and private sector business development. Shakadoon has also recently launched the first innovation and entrepreneurship hub in Somaliland, Hargeisa Innovation Hub, also called Har Hub. We are also joined by Lorsa, a senior investment manager of Cordate Investment Management, CIM, which is the asset management branch of Cordate Foundation based in Netherlands. CIM deploys growth capital to SMEs and MFIs in fragile countries and underserved emerging economies. We also have Dr. Ba, who is currently the chief policy economist at African Development Bank. Before joining the bank, he was a lecturer of economics at the University of Auckland. His research interests are in the area of macroeconomics, economic development, labor economics, and international economics. He has published numerous journals, articles, and made several paper presentations. Lastly, Flaubert, thank you for allowing me and patiently listening to me. Senior Program Specialist with the Sustainable Inclusive Economies Program of Canada's International Development Research Centre. He oversees program delivery in West and Central Africa, especially with respect to women economic empowerment in the transition to a low carbon economy, impact investing, and new business model. Flaubert has also authored and co-authored several publications and peer-reviewed several journals. Flaubert will be moderating the session. Thank you so much for listening to me. Flaubert, over to you.
Thank you so much, Sharo. Welcome, dear panelists, to this session. Welcome, dear participants. Just to give a flavor of, what this session is about and why we are claiming your time, for this session. Well, when you look at the African continent, what we know is that about 50% of the countries in transition, like worldwide, are located in Africa. And in those countries, we have 1/3 of the continent's population. What that means is that, governments have so much on their plates in terms of providing social services to their population, in terms of rebuilding their countries, in terms of, developing infrastructure and so on and so forth. So there is a lot, but resources are limited. And that is where the private sector can come in. Their opportunities, their ideas, they can make potentially a huge difference. And we know, as we've seen, especially in the context of this pandemic, that there are so many ideas, so many innovations coming up almost daily across the continent, including in those so-called transition countries, transition states. Now, the problem is, if as an entrepreneur, you have a great idea that can make a difference, and you want to take that idea to scale, you need capital, you need real money. And typically, as we saw in the video, raising capital is an issue, is a challenge, at least locally. But we also know that there are investors out there who are looking for ideas, who are looking for projects. Now, how do we work towards building that ecosystem in transition states so that those who need capital can actually meet with those who have the money? And it is in that context that this project was developed, to get a sense of what is happening in some countries in Africa in a way that helps us to get a clear understanding, a better understanding of the field reality, but also the potential strategies that can be used to connect those who need capital with those who have those resources. And through their analysis, Intellecap came up with the suggestions of 3 models. We know the same model may not apply in all 3 countries, but what we want to do as part of this session is to touch on each of those models, mostly from an investment perspective, but also from a policy-making perspective. What role can the various stakeholders play in building that ecosystem for impact investing in transition countries? I'm not going to once again define the 3 models, which Shuru presented brilliantly a few minutes ago. But the models we are talking about here are basically the outcome-based financing model, the blended financing model, but also leveraging technology and fintech, to meet the financial needs of those who are in who are looking for funding. Without further ado, I would like to call on our first panelist. Here I'm talking of Dr. Aji from the African Development Bank. Before joining the bank, you know, you've been in academia, you are a researcher, so you understand both not only the policy making aspect, but also the research aspect. And we know that the bank has been very active across the continent, working with countries at all levels of development, especially countries in transition. And we know you've been working along development finance institutions to meet the financing needs of the private sector actors in those countries, especially impact social entrepreneurs. So would like to draw from that experience to get your sense, your view on two of the models that Intellecap is proposing, especially the blended finance model and then the outcome-based model. So what do you think are the strengths of those models, and how does the implementation of these models change from one country to the other? From your experience, what would you say, Dr. Aji?
Thank you very much, Flaubert. Thank you to Charu and to the organizers for inviting me to this discussion. Actually, this is a topic that is very dear to me. At the bank, I deal with the challenge of SME financing, right? So when she was presenting, I couldn't help but smile, because this is something we are dealing with every day. How do we support SMEs? And also in the bank, I developed our framework on how to implement blended finance in the bank. So it's a topic that I know very well. So let me just come back before answering your question. So why do we use outcome-based financing? Sometimes we call it result-based financing, we call it performance-based financing, and so on. So depending on the modality of implementation and how we want to, the focus of it. So this comes from the idea of we need to increase the efficiency of aid, and we need to increase the effectiveness of development finance. So that's when it was born. So instead focusing on financing inputs, you know, saying, oh, I'm going to buy a generator, I'm going to build for this, donors and development finance institutions said, let's focus on the output or result themselves and outcome, because that's what we care about. And it's also the idea of let's align, that help align the goals between the principal, the one who finance, and the agent, the government or government agency that execute, right? So this is why this model started and gained some popularity. In the bank, we have principles for result-based financing, and we have guidelines how we adapt these. But one thing we need to say, it is something that is asked by governments, right? So we do not impose it on our member countries, but if they ask us, they want to finance a sector program or project through the result-based financing, then we respond, we do some assessment, we look at whether this program is something that has the prerequisite and whether we can implement it effectively. I will talk later about that later, right? And on the blended finance, why do we want to use blended finance? So blended finance is that we use concessional money from donors or from our concessional fund at the bank ourselves, and we mix it with commercial financing so we can overcome some let's say, some barriers, because we cannot finance it strictly on the commercial basis. I'll give you an example for that. Or we want to achieve a specific target, right? So both result-based financing and blended finance want to achieve some specific development impact. Even if you are financing the private sector, you want to achieve development impact. So just an example, for instance, if we want to increase SME financing, but we know, as Sharu showed, that interest rates are high in many of these countries. So the cost of lending is high. If we have some concessional financing, we blend that with our finance, we could give a loan to a local bank at lower rate. In turn, they can lend that at a lower rate to the bank. So we want to achieve something specific, so we can use the blending, right? And similarly for result-based financing, for instance, you want to improve the power sector, right? And we could finance the inputs, but implementation may not be effective, right? But if we agree with the government or government agency, then we can say, we have these specific targets, do your program, we leave you the leeway, you are flexible to implement as you wish, but when you have a result, we will give you this amount of money. So we have specified. So this is how these things will work. I will talk later about them, for how we implement and so on. Yeah, let me stop there. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Dr. Aji. That was great. Next, I would like to hear from Abdikani, our dear friend from Somalia. As a project manager, as a program manager, sorry, you've been very involved, you know, in supporting SMEs in Somalia. So I would like you to come in on the issue of blended finance. In your view, what are the areas of technical assistance that enterprises in countries like Somalia need to do most? And also in terms of financial instruments, which ones do you think are more appropriate or are preferred by enterprises in countries like Somalia or in transition economies in general?
Thank you very much. Also, I would like to thank you to the other panelists and organizers as well. And my name is Abdikani Diri. I'm the program manager of Shaqadon, an organization that supported the SMEs and also young entrepreneurs through access to finance and also technology for development and other stuffs. So if I come back to your question, technical assistance is something that we involve on day-to-day with the entrepreneurs, including the existing growth and also the small. And also we support the aspiring youth who are willing to start a business. So to my experience, I think I can mention some of the most required technical assistance that enterprises in Somalia need. And one of the most important things is that for them to understand how they can finance the businesses. So a lot of businesses do not know where they can get the finance and even the model and how they can request the finance from the banks and other financial institutions. So that's the technical. So a lot of companies, they come to us and so we assist them to do the request so that they can get finance from the banks and also other investors. So that's a very key technical support that the companies need. So, and the other thing they need is that for them to also understand how to manage their credits and how to also manage their expenditure, stocks, and debt as well. And one thing that we regularly know is that the needs of the companies from one-to-one is different from one-to-one, so that usually they need coaching and mentorship based on that have been customized. So based on the needs of the individual companies, because the needs of the companies are different from one to another. So the coaching for the companies is also a very important thing. Business model is also a challenge where the companies they do not have a business models. So in East Africa, the people they start the business so that they don't have a business model and business plan strategies and marketing strategies. So that's a key thing that the companies usually they need such kind of assistance. And also the other important thing that I can mention is the enabling environment where the companies need assistance. For example, recently we have established a call center where we connected the private companies in the northern part of the country, in Somaliland, the northern part of the country, where the SMEs can now call these call centers and get information from the Ministry of Trade, so that they call a short code, so that short code is connected to the ministry, so they get support from the ministry regarding to the how they can register their companies, how can they pay the tax, and how they can get assistance from the government. And also that system also connected to the service providers who can support these companies if they need to get a training or such kind of stuff. So such kind of technological related technical, assistance is also very necessary for the companies who are stationed in Somalia. And here we have also seen that most of the companies in Somalia is informal, so that it's very difficult for them to formalize because they don't know how to formalize their business, how to register, how to formalize their company. So sometimes you find a very big company, but that has never been registered with the government. So that formalization of the companies is also a very important thing. Also, you find here companies with a foreign employee, and that shows that the skill gap where we don't have the right skilled people who can lead these companies. So teaching the companies so that they can ask the foreign employees to transfer the skills to the local people who can run the company in the future. That's also another technical assistance that we think the companies need here. And other important thing I'm thinking that we have tried in 2020 to support the companies is digital marketing, because here this case the penetration of internet is very big in East Africa, but the problem is that most of the companies they don't take the benefit of the internet. So there are very few companies, mainly the big companies, who have access to social marketing. They can hire social media employee. They can use online channels, but the small medium enterprise is very difficult for them to use such kind of online platforms, but they still need support on that sector. If I come to the financial instrument, I think also cash-based, or only the cash-based instrument, mainly equity and maybe a loan or debt, is very relevant to the local entrepreneurs, enterprises in Somalia, because these are preferred, because liquidity is very important for the companies here in Somalia, because the cash is important. But one big problem is that most of the banks we have in Somalia is Sharia compliance based, which is they use only Islamic Sharia compliance. So if these banks adapt along with favorable lending conditions, that can be also a very important thing. But providing financial opportunities to the local people, enterprises in the country through these banks or through other financial institutions is going to be key, but should be a cash-based or, yeah.
Thank you so much, Abdikani. I think you touched on a very important point, and that will take me to the next speaker, to next panelist, that is Abubakar. Abdikani talked about, he touched on the issue of the internet. So this is really about fintech and leveraging technology to meet the financing needs of companies in transition countries. So in your experience as a founder of a company that is doing pretty well, what do you think, or what benefits do you see for a company in leveraging those technologies and fintech in general, either to look for financing or to provide financing?
Thank you, Flobert. And looking at it from the perspective of Somalia, which we have worked in for the last 8 years, and according to the the World Bank, and Somalia probably has about 155 million transactions worth of 2.7 billion, or that's 6% of GDP, which are done through mobile money every month. And the same data also shows that 7 out of 10 actually use mobile money. The same data also shows that only 15% of the population have bank accounts or bank with the conventional banks, while 73% of the population have and uses and mobile money. So, and using that as a tool to determine the credit worthiness and also to see the capability in terms of cash flow of an individual or a business, then and fintech or leveraging mobile money specifically, and because online is still in nascent stages in Somalia, but mobile money is the one that has taken off and doing very well. Actually, the first time and when I was in the country and I was to make payments, and then I was surprised that everywhere you go, and then from the shoe polishing to grocery to hotels, everywhere, everybody was telling, to tell you use mobile money to pay them. And having been used to Kenya, and actually M-Pesa was at that time and being talked globally as a big innovation, I was like, wait a minute, because I'm up from Kenya, and for me to make mobile transaction, I have to go to the next kiosk to either send money or withdraw money at that stage. And in Somalia already, people were using mobile money, just all transactions were being done that way. And I definitely find that this is a platform that provides you with the right data, and it also gives you an opportunity to assess the ability and of a business or an individual. And definitely, I think that is a platform that can be used and to reduce the amount of bureaucracy that is usually needed between banks or financials and whoever to be financed, provide bank statements, to provide financial statements, provide records of your cash transactions, cash flows, and forecasting, which you can hardly find in this kind of countries, because people have businesses but they don't keep records. So when you now want to invest in a business or finance a business, the biggest challenge that we have seen is, and if you subject them to the typical criteria that used in most of other countries, then you will hardly finance anyone or advance any financing to anyone. So definitely this platform is a platform that is going to provide and all the information that is required and facilitate financing in those countries.
Thank you so much. There are so many questions coming in through the chat. Maybe Dr. Ajay can touch on one of them as he speaks to the next question that I have for him, which is really about Model 1 and Model 3. Remember, Model 1 is about is on result-based financing, and Model 3 is about leveraging technology, fintech. So in your experience, usually those models are said to be confronted with the complex structure and differential interest rate of various stakeholders. So what role do you see for policy making in addressing some of those challenges?
Yeah, thanks, Robert. Actually, this is a very good question because, financing the private sector in low-income countries in general, it's challenging, right? Sharu talked about the issue of infrastructure, the issue of regulatory environment, and access to finance and so on. Right? So now it is even worse in transition countries that face some challenges and that are just coming out of those challenges that are trying to build systems. So policy is very important for the private sector to be able to create and develop businesses. We need to have a good regulatory environment. Right? So that regulatory environment is necessary. So we need to support government through policy dialogue and institutional building so they can put in place a regulatory environment that is adequate for the private sector to develop. I think Abdikani talked about the issue of informality. So why businesses are informal? Sometimes they don't know the process, but often, even if they want to be formalized, the process is very complex. And the benefit of being formal is not clear, because if you are formal, you're going to pay taxes, but then you don't see any benefit from it. So policy dialogue in that to help simplify processes is important. But we also need to keep in mind, this is not just about putting things on paper, it's in actual implementation. In many of our countries, you see, oh, there have been reforms, but ask the businesses that are there trying to use these policies and regulation. They will tell you that it is still challenging. So it's not just the paper, but we need to implement these things adequately. So policy is very important. And for result-based financing to work, you need this good policy environment, and you need to be able to trust that institutions that are in charge of implementing these programs, they are transparent, they have the capacity to implement programs. So that's on the result-based framework. And also on the tech side, you have the access to internet. That is very important. And for us in the bank, we support government to make sure that they have the adequate infrastructure so businesses can have access, and also they can afford the internet, because for you to leverage this fintech, you need to have this access. But also the competition policies are important, you know. So you need to be able to, so like telecom companies, you need to make sure that they don't have monopoly power, so they can charge large fees to businesses. So that's on the policy side. Let me just touch on one of the questions on the chat. Somebody asked, how do you ensure that outcomes are adequately measured on the result-based finance? This is a key thing, right? Because when you define result, you need to make sure that they are measurable. So that's why it's not all type of programs that can be financed through result-based financing. You need to be able to clearly define the result and link them with output and activities. You need to be able to have a cost and financing plan for those. And also the cost of measuring the result should not be prohibitive. Otherwise, there is no efficiency. So that's let me stop there on this. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Dr. Aji. We have a participant who would like to come in and share his experience vis-a-vis Model 2, which is on blended finance. Maybe we can give him really 1 minute to share that experience. Aidarus, are you available? Are you ready to share?
Yes,
Yes, come in, please.
Thank you. I just wanted on the models and model 2, which is the blended financing. At the early stages of Solagen, and while we were setting up in Somalia, and we were able to access, but that was, I believe, maybe the only one that I had seen, and other than another instrument that was floated by the World Bank as a grant, and that was made available in Somalia at that time, at that early stage time, and which was blended grant and a repayable debt, which in total was about 520. So 20% of that was grant, and the rest was repayable debt. And the grant actually was mainly for, I would say, technical assistance. So it was to provide us with financial expertise and things like that. And so to hire the right people and also to train our staff. And I believe if that opportunity was not availed to us at that early stage, maybe we wouldn't be here today speaking and sharing our experience. So we were given 5 years, and with 1 year, 5 years in total. I think there was 1 year moratorium, and for us to be able to set things out. And we have been able to pay back and the 8% that was repayable debt within the 5 years. And I believe that was an enough demonstration, and that if institutions and invest in fragile countries in ideas that are worth and investing in, then there is high opportunity that to be able to, for those ideas or those businesses to pay back. I don't know how many stories are out there in countries that are actually very stable, who have been given and blended financing at that stage of our company. In a country like that, it was 8% repayable grant and being able to pay the whole amount. That was backed by Somali Stability Fund and led by US DFID. But I haven't seen much happening after that. And despite the fact that we were able to demonstrate that there are companies that are investable and they are able to pay back the investment.
Thank you so much for sharing that experience. But maybe don't go just as yet, because the next question is actually yours. Regarding model 1, do you think that that model really helps enterprises in transition countries secure some, the passion capital that they need? And related to that, what are, some of the demand side challenges that you see with that model?
The challenge I see with that is especially for small enterprises that are at early stages, because what it basically means is you have to utilize your own capital, or you have to find capital somewhere else to be able to implement the ideas and be able to demonstrate the results that were articulated at the beginning, and only then are you going to be given the funding. So the funding depends on the result. So the question is, can companies at early stages be able to raise their funds? And if they can, do they actually need the funds? And really, so for companies that are early stage, I don't think that result-based is what they need. Probably what they need is a blended grant and with repayable debts and coupled with TA, which is very important, because if we didn't get that TA, the grant that was given for the TA, I don't know if we will have been able, despite the fact that we were well-meaning and we really wanted to pay back, but you need the tools and you need the skills to be able to utilize and achieve, actualize the dreams and to be able to pay back. And then, so that for result and based, I think that is the biggest challenge for small companies. But for big companies or companies that are our stage, then, and I believe that what they will need is probably a result-based and combine it with now debt, because we have moved probably and from a grant stage for the ideas that we have already built on, unless it's a completely new idea that we are trying. But the ones that we have already, which was invested in at early stage grant, then they don't need grant. They are already sustainable. What is needed is just scaling up. So to do that scale, I think debt plus result-based financing definitely work very well.
Very, very quickly, can you speak to this question in the chat? So you were able to raise funding despite the fact that most of the international financing organizations are not able to provide funding through Islamic financing?
Okay.
Very briefly, if you can touch on that.
And briefly, and what happened was that was an innovative, and I would say, and fund that was allocated by somebody actually who was outside development field. So the gentleman who was heading that fund at that time came from the private sector, and he didn't see why the private sector was not given an opportunity. So he decided to put out a call for proposal to look at ideas that are worth investing. And this one was debt without interest and grant. So and that is purely already and Islamically and compliant because it didn't come with interest.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Next, I would like to invite
Robert,
sure, yes,
Can I add something? Because that was not the only funding we got. Later on, we got actually pure debts, and maybe I can mention SIMA Fund, which is one of the funds that have backed Solagen. And I mean, when they approached us, we had to explain to them that we couldn't access an interest-based financing, and they were flexible enough to listen to us. And in the sense that they were willing to listen, understand what our requirement is, and through that we were able to come to an understanding and design or financing that was Islamically and acceptable, which is asset financing or stock financing, whichever way you probably look at. So I will encourage people not to say, I don't want interest, but to have conversation with financials and tell them what type of financing works for you, and be able to convince them that it's worth structuring that for you. Because we have done that one, we have done the second one, and we are doing the third one, and we have been able to convince the financials.
Thank you so much for that testimony. So Dr. Aj has spoken a lot about blended finance, but I would like to call in Loriza, who is a senior investment manager based in Sierra Leone. And we know that your company, Court Aid, has been operating in Sierra Leone for more than a century. So you know the country very well, you know the context very well, you know the region very well. In your view, in terms of using blended finance as a vehicle to meet the financing needs of companies in Sierra Leone in particular, but in transition economies in general, what characteristics of those countries do you see can pose a challenge to using that kind of approach?
Yeah, thank you, Flaubert. Indeed, Court Aid Investment has been making investments since 1997, and we deploy debt capital to SMEs and microfinance institutions in fragile countries and underserved emerging economies. And 60% of our portfolio investees are located in countries with that are high or very high in fragility. And 53% of our investments, we are the first international lender to them. And in Sierra Leone, we started our investing activities in Sierra Leone in 2004 and 2005, around the time that indeed Sierra Leone was post-conflict country. And our first intervention was to join a consortium of donors to support the development of the microfinance sector. And we had a technical assistance facility, as well as a direct lending window for MFIs in that facility. And it had a number of challenges, as you can imagine, for a transition country. But overall, I think it had a success because it disseminated microfinance best practices post-war. And eventually, the MFIs were able to access investment bilaterally from the participants in the consortium. I think the challenge in the blended finance with TA model, the model 2, is that it is very costly approach because, for example, you really have to provide a lot of pre-investment technical assistance. And in these countries, post-war, many highly skilled nationals, you lose them because of the war, the migration, and you have to build institutional and management capacity to a large extent. So sometimes we have to embed technical advisors in these institutions, and it takes time to see results. Sometimes you will see the results after 1.5 years or 2 years. So in other words, investment readiness in this type of context can really, really take time. And also, we joined the CordAid investment, joined the IFC as equity investor in the West Africa Venture Fund, which was specifically designed to provide equity to early stage companies, also post-war Sierra Leone and Liberia. And there's also a huge technical assistance budget there that was deployed along with equity. And you will realize that it's very challenging to see results. No matter how much TA you put into. And we need to realize that in order to create really success, your TA to the investee, it's not enough, because it takes the whole ecosystem for the private sector to succeed. So, I mean, your TA can only prioritize, and then you then need to collaborate with other funders or stakeholders to address other aspects of the business environment or the investment climate. So yeah, and another challenge I think also in implementing the model is that, for example, right now, I mean, like Sierra Leone is not really post-conflict anymore. It's just economically fragile, but a lot of things, a lot of aspects in the country are really improving. And so, but we're still here, in the essence that it's still economically fragile. And we think that although we have already, invested in 15 companies and 4 financial institutions, we feel that we have not maximized our impact yet. And that's why we are currently developing a fund in which we have cooperated with, we received a first loss investable grant from the USAID Trade Hub. And we will also get a portfolio guarantee from the US DFC. And we would like to scale our impact, our ambitions in Sierra Leone and in West Africa in general. But we foresee that, okay, we have this guarantees, we have the first loss grants, and we indeed need to crowd in commercial funding together with us in order to to implement our ambitions and scale. But we expect also commercial investors to manage expectations. And the challenge in transition states would be to realize market financial returns. And to invest in this type of context, sometimes we need to be prepared, to realize just below market financial returns in order to create impact. But sometimes, like, in the case of CordAid investment, we strive as much as possible to negotiate with our parent organization, our main funder, CordAid Foundation, if we can, if they can accept capital preservation in real terms in order for us to, for example, accept or pay for foreign exchange losses, so that we can give local currency financing to our investees. So those are some of the examples of the challenges, the aspects that we have to consider in using Model 2 in this context.
Thank you so much, Lorisa. Maybe you can speak to a question that just came in through the chat, where one of the participants is asking whether companies can obtain local currency loans, and if not, how do they go about managing the foreign exchange risk? In your experience, how does that work?
Yes. So in our experience, we offer both hard currency and local currency financing. And as much as possible, if you are not, we do not offer hard currency loans if you are not earning foreign exchange as well. So we would like you to take local currency financing. And then we, in our case, we take the hedge, and we, of course, we find ways, either specific transaction hedging for the foreign exchange risk, or we use a portfolio approach in our hedging so that we can provide local currency financing. So if you are a company, say in Sierra Leone, yes, you can access a local currency financing. It is more expensive. It is more expensive than a US dollar loan, for example, is because of the foreign exchange risk. And that is, sometimes we use the central bank's monetary policy rate, inflation rate, all of these indicators in order to cover our costs or benchmark against the cost of FX risk. And indeed, you have to pay more, but then we try as much as possible to stay as close to what the commercial banks are giving. So that's what I can say with regards about that.
Thank you so much, Larissa. Maybe I can invite Dr. Arch to share the African Development Bank's perspective on the same, because we know yes, they come in, to meet the needs, the financial needs of government, of private sector actors. What you've shared is the perspective of a company like yours. It will be good to hear from the bank whether in their business practices, companies can also obtain local currency loans. I don't know if Dr. Aj can speak to that.
Yes. Yeah. Thanks. This is a challenging question. Local currency loans is just a few currencies that we offer loans in local currency. We have in total about 13 currencies in the continent where we can offer loans. The most common that we use is the South African ZAR. Why? Because we can raise financing from the local market and then lend it. We have the Kenyan shilling and the like, right? So, but in some currencies, as Larissa said, there is a lot of risk because the fluctuation of the currency means that you may incur losses. So we do not offer loans in those currencies. But what do we do? To reach small and medium companies, we often go through the financial intermediaries, the commercial banks. Those we can give them loans in hard currency because they have customers that earn hard currency and local currency, right? So we give them loans and then we ask them to lend to the businesses. It's also, we use this because also it's hard for us. I mean, we are a big institution for covering the whole continent. We cannot finance 1,000 SMEs, right? So, because if you finance somebody, you need to monitor the loan and how it is, right? So going to Sierra Leone finance an SME, it's hard for us to do, right? Even the cost of making the loan is high. A cost of a loan could be, even the processing could be $100,000. So that's not for an SME. But we use the local banks so we can reach the SMEs. And sometimes what we do, we blend in, we use blended finance so the cost of financing to the end beneficiary, the SME, is lower. And also we can provide technical assistance because this is very, very important for helping SMEs to make sure that they can grow. Sometimes also we have some grants. So one of the programs I'm implementing is in Madagascar. We have a 1 million UA, that about $1.3 million. We want to train SMEs, build their capacity, help them connect with large companies so they can have markets, so they can have business. And then we'll give some some banks, some money so as a guarantee so they can lend to those SMEs that have been trained, that got contract, so they can also have the financing required to make sure they deliver on this. So we have different ways of supporting SMEs, and the other one is on the equity side, right? We invest in a lot of private equity firms, on venture capital companies, so that they can reach SMEs. So all these ways we use. Flaubert, if you allow me 1 minute, one of the things that Abubakar talked about is on the challenge of accessing result-based financing for a company, right? So I think in the beginning I said most of the time we use result-based financing through government programs, not directly for individual companies. But companies can be the one that implement those programs, companies or NGOs. Often, let's say you want to increase a literacy rate. We can finance a program to increase it and with the government, right? But the government, instead of saying just it's public schools, they can say private schools also are eligible to implement the program. So it can be. And sometimes in designing these programs, an initial amount of the funding is dispersed to allow some of the companies or even the government to start, to get a head start. Otherwise, as Abubakar said, they may not be able to even start, right? So there are many ways these programs are designed, but this is one way businesses can access result-based financing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Arch. But maybe since you have the floor, maybe you can touch on an issue that Abubakar started discussing earlier in relation to the fintech model, the fintech approach. I would like you to look at, from the supply side, from the investor's perspective, what do you see as potential challenges in using the fintech approach to financing?
Okay, on the supply side, so first you need to have programs that are established for investor to invest in, right? So a program that is well designed and that you have proof of concept sometimes, so then investors can invest in those. There is also sometimes perceived risk. Often, our programs in our countries are always thought of as high risk, even though many businesses pay, like lending to women-owned businesses, for instance. It's been proven that, women-owned businesses, they repay their loans, right? But often, you think, let's say, if you think about Somalia, you may say, oh, this is a failed state, the risks are high. But if you had the information on what is going on, actually, you can say, you can have programs that can work. We have examples of businesses here present that are making it and making a difference on the ground. So disseminating information, in my view, it's important to make sure that perceived risk don't take over, so that we do not even get to the level where we are assessing the real risk of program. So those are some of the risks. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Elach. Maybe Abubakar can come in from the demand side, meaning from the enterprise perspective. Earlier on, you were talking about the challenges with internet access and all that. Are there other challenges that you think are important or relevant in using the fintech or technology-based approach?
Maybe from the Somalia perspective, knowing the population is Islamic faith, and some of the challenges that definitely needs to be addressed or and be conscious about is you cannot lend cash directly. which and you know, in most of the platforms, it's the easiest way to lend. It's easier to lend money, and once you have confidence in the enterprise, or you have confidence in the individual business owner, and who is trying to access financing. So and now, how do you be able to serve the whole spectrum of needs? And using the platform is going to be a little bit of challenge, because for businesses that provide and say services and goods, then that may be easy, because you will provide the goods and the services to either your peer, another business, or the customer, and at a price that already agreed on, and then the person pays that price to you, and that is currently, and because it is dollar based, so the whole system, and those who have been to Somalia, is 90% or so of the transactions happens in dollar. Then the question now is, if that is not the case, and then there is different currencies that be used, and then you have the rates changing, then it's going to be, let's say, for example, Solagen installs a system and for a customer, and on say lease on model, which we do, and then we did the lease on the Somali shilling, and the lease is for about 3 years, and then and there's a fluctuation of currency that's going to affect us, and because we buy in dollars. So that is one challenge, definitely, which is inherent. And but other than that, now the cash also, you cannot advance cash, so that is also another challenge. And the other challenge that I'm seeing is, and there wasn't licensed and mobile money, despite the fact that there has been mobile money transactions that have been happening in the country. The first one, I think, was given last week to Hormuz by the Central Bank of Somalia. So also the fact that it's not regulated, and there's nothing to guarantee, and all the transactions that are happening, that is also a challenge that I see. But yes, and it has been running for the last 30 years, and I think somehow people have confidence in it, and no one has defaulted, or and the companies have been backing and the systems, but then and there's that risk. But I see the government already taking action, so hopefully that now and it will not be a big risk. Because I say risk because, say there was 1 million or 2 million that was advanced to Solagen, and as a result of that, Solagen has scaled up and given and all these clients based on the mobile money transactions that have been happening, which was used as a criteria for the credit and setting, and with the hope that and every time the money comes to their mobile money, then it's remitted or it's checked. There's a check of balance, or a check of system, let's say. And but now, because of that lack of regulation, and if the company does,
it's unfortunate. I think that Abubakar is
yeah, Flo, but yeah, sorry, and I think I was lost. I just seen my. So I'm saying that that is an inherent challenge with the mobile money, despite the fact that its penetration is very high, but because it has not been regulated, then there is no proper guarantee that backs up, just like maybe M-Pesa or other and M-Pesa, sorry, mobile money in other countries, and that is a challenge with Somalia.
Thank you so much, Abubakar. In terms of the objectives of this session, we have like 15 minutes left, but I think most of the participants here are, eager to learn from your experience in terms of how to approach this transition, the context of these transition countries. So it'll be good to get a sense of, what are some of the critical factors that need to be considered as an investor trying to come into either of those countries. So maybe I can start with Lorisa, if you can reflect on the case of Model 1, which speaks to the result-based financing, but also Model 2, which is blending finance. What are some of the critical factors that one needs to keep in mind?
Yeah, okay. I think for coordinated investment, we haven't implemented outcome-based financing for private sector yet. So our parent organization uses results-based financing, similar to what Dr. Haji has said, that we use, we use it as a model, as an approach in public sector projects such as health sector strengthening and or security and justice. So, but for a private sector, we've only used so far the blended finance with DA model. And I think in terms of the critical success factors, I think one I would say is the right balancing of commercial interests together with developmental and impact expectations. So I already mentioned earlier about our challenges and raising more commercial funding because they have their high expectations for investors, funders for returns. But but I think one way would be really to approach, to target, to have a more focused and targeted approach in mobilizing resources in order that we can identify the right funder with the right risk return profile that that could meet this balancing with commercial expectations as well as the developmental objectives. And I think also another critical success factor would be to aim really for sustainability and to really carefully and be smart about using concessions and to in this type there will be a lot of demand for concessions in this context, but nevertheless we should minimize it as much as possible because we would like to have financial discipline and we would like the market to get used to commercial approaches and and so that we can really go as close as possible to becoming really be sustainable. And of course it's the investor also should really be agile and be very flexible, should try to be efficient and to reduce the bureaucracy. Once you are implementing this, try to reduce your bureaucracy and to be flexible in order to adapt quickly to a very changing environment. This environment can go from problems of war to Ebola or to whatever. So you have to really be flexible in this context. And of course, I also think that always try to monitor your performance, and evaluate your performance, and try to learn and always be accountable all the time in order to make it work for a long term.
Thank you so much, Larissa. Maybe Dr. Elach can come in once again on model 1 and model 3. Model 1 being, the outcome-based model, and model 3 being the fintech one, in terms of the critical factors that one should keep in mind.
Yeah, thanks, Robert. So as Larissa said, model 1 is most of the time used for public financing, right? For program and project implemented by the government, but that can be implemented by some private sector and NGOs. So critical factors are ownership. One of them is ownership, because the government or the government ministry need to own the project or program. So they need to make sure that they want to achieve what is trying to achieve. So then with that, there needs to be alignment between the funders and the government. So this alignment is important. The other thing that I talked about before, it's the importance of measuring the result of the performance criteria. Okay, so this needs to be defined clearly in the ex ante, right? And you need to be able to measure it. And also, most of the time, the measurement is done by an independent third party. Because if we are a contract, you tell me you achieve something, I can come say, no, no, you didn't achieve it. But we need to agree beforehand saying somebody will measure, will tell us if it's achieved or not, and what they will use. So this need to be agreed beforehand on that. So the other thing is we need to try to avoid perverse incentives, because this result base is most of the time the incentive is the monetary incentive. Sometimes government workers and players, it's not just monetary incentive they have. For instance, the healthcare sector or education, where you use this a lot, right? You have some teachers, they want just to teach because that's something they love to do. Now, if you come in, you say, oh, if your student achieve this grade or they perform well, then we'll pay you a bonus. Sometimes people can say, you know, this is just now it's monetary, it's not that doing what we love doing anymore. So that can be a problem there, and some may abuse even the system. If you say, I'm rewarding these type of criteria, people may start neglecting other things that are important. Take in the health sector, right? You can't say, okay, we want to, if you do HIV testing or you manage tuberculosis, then we pay you a bonus. So if you are a clinic, you say, oh, diarrhea and malaria is no longer rewarded, so let me just focus on those that are rewarded. So you have this perverse incentive that you need to be able to
aware of.
It's important. On the tech side, regulation is important. That Abubakar talked about this, because the regulation need to be, let's say, a smart regulation. You don't want to prevent innovation, right? If you have some cumbersome regulation, then you can prevent innovation. On the other hand, you need to make sure that customers are protected. So we've seen the consequences of innovation in the US, for instance, the housing bubble and all this mortgage-backed security. So this is something we need to be careful. So it's a tough balancing act. You allow for innovation, but at the same time, you ensure that the system itself is stable. Right? So that's what I can add. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Elaj. Next, I'm going to call in Abdikani. I wanted you to come in with regard to the first and the second model. First model being the outcome-based one, and the third one being fintech. So, would like to hear from you in terms of, you know, what are the critical factors that one needs to keep in mind. But as you speak to those two questions, maybe you can also touch on some of the questions that were raised in the chat. There is one that is on, you know, technical assistance. How do you provide technical assistance in conflict-affected areas? And another question still addressed to you is, you know, how in your view, to what extent is the enabling environment changing in your country? And, you know, what kind of, what can enablers or ecosystem support providers, what can they do to sustain their organization?
Thank you very much. Let me start with the question from the chat. So it's one question is about the techniques that provide entrepreneurs in conflict, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So usually, so we have two cases regarding the providing a technical assistance to the people who have been affected by the conflict and who are living in a conflict area. So, for example, in Mogadishu, the capital city of Somalia, there is insecurity in the past. There was insecurity in the past because of the presence of Al-Shabaab. So we used to do a training for the SMEs. So it sometimes became difficult to call the SMEs for them to attend the training because of the insecurity. And then we have started a radio program where each week or maybe each week we used to broadcast 3 episodes on specific things on business. So that program was mainly focused on marketing and also the agriculture sectors. So later we have expanded that. So businesses used to listen that program from the radios. There is a business radio in Mogadishu, so we used to air on that radio. So that was a good model to reach a massive number of SMEs through the radio. So we used to air 3 times a day that program. So if you miss in the morning, then you can listen in the afternoon, or you can listen in the evening. And to know how many people have listened to the radio program, we have had a short code where people, at the end of each episode, we ask the people to call that number and to answer 3 questions about the lessons that they have listened from the radio program. So there was awards of if the 5 persons who answered, who provided the best answers or the correct answers, used to receive some top abis. So that's how we used to motivate even the SMEs to listen to our program. So each day we used to reach 500 SMEs. So that's kind of a radio program. That's one thing. The other thing is that in 2017, we found out that the farmers who used to sell their products, they did not access to market information, so that there is a middleman who took the products from the farmers with very low, cheap price and sells the products in the market with high price. So when they meet the farmers, then they share their histories that they did not get any profit from their products. Then we have developed a program. This is another technology stuff, so that I can even show you from here. So this is basically in Somali language.
Yeah.
So
we can see you. Huh?
So we have developed this. Yeah. So this is how it works. So the farmers should call 53315. So you can listen.
We cannot see you.
So this, so let me call it in. So it composed 3 features. One, touch 1 if you are a farmer, then you touch 1, then it asks you, do you want to sell a product? Then you touch 1 or 2 or whatever. Then you touch 1, then you can put the product you have in the system. Then the middleman or the market people from the market can contact you, or again, it can tell you the price of the product in the market. It says price 1 if you wanted to get the price of the tomato, price 2 if you wanted to get the price of the watermelon. Then when the middleman go to the village and try to get the product from the farm, the farmers are already aware because this has improved the the purchasing power of the farmers. So we have a system in place. So again, in the system, the farmers, they touch another number to access a coaching and training from the providers. So we are connected the system to the service providers for the farmers. So they contacted that. Then the farmers here, the service providers in the system, they record some training messages or something about the problems in the farm. So the farmers listen that also information from the system. Sometimes the farmers, they send us questions about the problems they have. So we send that questions to a consultant. That consultant, they record the message. Then we send the message to the farmers through an IVR system, interactive voice response system. In the system, So that was a very helpful system that assisted a lot of farmers. So now we have 700 farmers registered in the system, regularly get mentorship, coaching, access to market information, and such kind of stuff. So that is two, examples in our system. And regarding to the other system, there is another system which is also, we have designed in English. So 944. So let me show this as well.
You know, your camera is off. And anyway, we are really running out of time because we are now 2 minutes behind schedule. So, okay. Sorry?
Okay. Maybe I have a problem with the. Yeah.
It's okay. I guess we'll have another opportunity to continue the conversation because, you know, there are people who are looking forward to joining other sessions and we don't want to delay them too much.
And for model 2, and from my experience in fragile countries, and trying to use the same appraisal and methodology that usually is used when you are doing the due diligence or you're doing financial appraisal for an enterprise, then that may be very difficult, especially from the Somali perspective. Record keeping is very poor and most companies are not well structured. And so getting financial statements, having cash flow statements, and which is what is used as a good indicator of a good company in other parts of the world, may not necessarily work very well in fragile countries. You might overlook very good businesses that are very viable, that are actually cash flow positive, and have the potential to expand in favor of companies that are run by people who are smart but yet don't have a lot of substance, who can put the papers together, because I've seen this happening in countries like Somalia. So you need to be more innovative. You need to be and also talk to the local and people who probably have interacted with this type of ecosystem, so that you go beyond the checklist, because the checklist won't work. And that is as far as model 2 is concerned. In terms of model 3, and I think the regulations are very important. It has a big potential, but also a few challenges. And one of them is regulation. The other one is being able to do a lot of integration between the systems. There's lack of skill gaps. APIs are not well developed in this type of countries. So having your system integrated with mobile money companies is going to be very challenging. So you need to be better. Thank you.
Thank you so much. On that note, I think we are coming to the end of this session, and I'm not going to take time to summarize the discussions. They're very rich, very insightful. I can only thank the panelists and the participant, not only for the time, but also for the interest. And yes, let's keep this conversation going and looking forward to the next opportunity to engage. So thank you so much to Intellecap for putting this and this session together. Thank you.